Welcome viewers! This is Sean, aka Bartleby's Corpse. You may recognize this channel from its Mass Effect crossover clips and edits. I want to do something a little different here today. I want to rank the squadmates of a Mass Effect trilogy based on how strong, deadly, and powerful they are. This is largely inspired by SonicHaXD and the Fourth Snake's Mortal Kombat tier lists, which tackle MK11 and the entire MK history respectively. I'll go ahead and link those in the description. Ultimately, this channel will include some additional longer form content, and this seems like a good topic to break the ice with. As always, feel free to like and subscribe if you enjoyed this video. Also, feel free to like and subscribe if you don't. Some guidelines before we get started. This will include all squadmates from Mass Effect Trilogy. This includes everyone and anyone who joins the party at any point. But this does not touch on any characters from Andromeda. Next, this is not a judgment on character quality, the relationship with Shepard, etc. It's also not really a strict judgment on their usefulness in gameplay. Game mechanics are mentioned, but they are not a big factor. This list is primarily story-based. Next, events that take place outside the 3 games and their DLC are considered, but not exhaustively. It's possible that this list glosses over a feat from some comic or some other source. Tiers are mostly self-explanatory. Conveniently, I can call S Spectre tier. Spectre tier essentially refers to characters who are the most dangerous in the galaxy. Of course, Mass Effect teams up Shepard with the galaxy's military elite, so even the lower tier members of this list generally represent the best, or some of the best their species have to offer. Finally, this list is highly subjective, or my opinion. There are very few head-to-head examples or direct comparisons from the games, so I'm making some judgment calls. With that out of the way, let's get to our list. You'll notice some patterns as I go, but for the first batch of squadmates, I want to set out a few examples to show where I'm going with this. We'll start with an uncontroversial S-tier entry, Garrus. Let's start with some obvious but not critical points. Obviously, he's a terrific character mechanically, especially in Mass Effect 3. He's considered a high-value squadmate to quote-unquote hold the door in Mass Effect 2. Story-wise, he is considered a top military mind by the end of the story. In Mass Effect 3, he serves as a senior strategist in the galaxy's top military. He's a highly capable leader and tactician. An example of this is when he leads a fire team in the Collector base. Most impressively, he proves how dangerous he is on Omega. There, he leads a team that severely hampers the operation of the galaxy's top mercenary bands. When his team gets betrayed, he successfully holds off a combined onslaught of 3 different mercenary groups for over a day, forcing these groups to adopt more desperate measures, including throwing gunships and freelancers at him. If you look at any other top-tier character, you should ask if they can do the same. Next, we'll go down to J tier. Now, this isn't really serious. In fact, Shepard never even commands them against any enemies. They're included here just for fun. The reason for it being J tier will be pretty obvious. First, we have Joker. Now, Joker might seem like an odd choice, but you do actually control Joker to kick off the final act of Mass Effect 2. He's not really dangerous on his own, little in the way of combat experience or training, and of course he has brittle bone disease. Still, Joker does escape and even thwarts a Collector abduction attempt with EDI's help. Next, we have Jenkins, the official Mass Effect red shirt. There's actually some cut content from Mass Effect 1 in which Jenkins provokes Kanon and promptly gets smacked down. Cut content isn't exactly canon, but it's still fun to mention, and one of the very few head-to-head matchups. As we all know, Jenkins was excited to see some real action before Eden Prime, and we all know how that turns out.
I should go.
Next, we are going down to the worst tier, which I specifically created for one specific character. Now, I had already recorded a draft of this, but when I went over my footage, I found that I had missed somebody. Not only would I have to re-record, but because of an error I made editing my tier template, I had to recreate the template altogether as well. I would have put him in J, even though his name doesn't start with J, but that would give him too much credit. So, for the worst tier, we are giving it to Wilson. Wilson briefly joins your squad after betraying Project Lazarus and trying to get everyone killed. This plan blew up in his face when the mechs he reprogrammed shot him. After you patch him up and save him, we see another rare head-to-head matchup when Miranda gives him what he deserves. In conclusion, screw you, Wilson. The next batch will get somewhat more serious, and we'll start with examples of each tier from D through A. In D tier, we have Kasumi. Kasumi cannot go higher than D simply because there's not enough evidence to go higher. She does raid Donovan Hawk's house, she is able to infiltrate the collector base vents, but she doesn't join in the Reaper War except as a technical consultant. In short, there's no real reason to go any higher. Next we have Thane in C tier. Now Thane is a deadly assassin, very adept at stealth, sniping, and hand-to-hand. We do see Thane smack Kai Lang a few times aboard the Citadel. He could potentially show more feats if he wasn't terminally ill, but there's just not enough to go on to put him above very many others. Not a ton of feats, and he still dies. Next in B tier we have Zaid. Now Zaid is one of those characters that could go higher. He founded the Blue Suns and led its military operations for years. He's respected and feared in the mercenary world even after losing control of the Blue Suns. He dispatches a group of rival mercenaries in Mass Effect 3. He infiltrates and brings down a Turian warship prior to Mass Effect 2. He's an immediate recruit for Cerberus' mission against the Collectors. He's mechanically recognized as a highly valuable asset in the Collector base to hold the door. As mentioned though, mechanics are not counted very heavily. Zaid is exceptionally dangerous, but probably not as dangerous as those we see in A tier and above. In A tier, we have Morinth. Now, Morinth is an example of a rare squadmate. She could potentially go higher as well. Ardat Yakshi are potentially some of the most dangerous members of the galaxy who feed off their victims to boost their already intimidating biotic power, and there's no stated limit to how powerful an Ardat Yakshi could get. Morinth can bring other organics under her sway, though this appears to require time, i.e. not happening in a straight fight. Morinth claims to be as strong as her mother, Samara. She can push back against Samara's biotic attacks. She can also hold a large barrier inside the collector base to repel secret swarms. There are a couple of circumstances in which Morinth can kill her mother. One is with Shepard's assistance, which doesn't really count. The other is if Samara is never recruited, which happens off-screen and frankly lacks context. However, it is doubtful that Morinth would spend her life fleeing from her mother if she was normally a match for her. She does not have the same level of training and is used to dealing with unsuspecting prey rather than real combatants. Going back down to D tier, we have Legion. Now, Legion down here may be controversial. He is arguably the top Geth operative. He can jump out of an airship without a parachute. Still, his on-screen feats and matchups don't exactly impress. For example, Tali holds Legion at gunpoint in Mass Effect 2 and can even kill Legion in Mass Effect 3. These are not perhaps the strongest examples, but they're rare examples of head-to-head matchups. The biggest knock against Legion is that when we first meet Legion, it goes down from some husks aboard the derelict Reaper. Not much more to say than that. In C tier, we have Tali. Now, some may want Tali to go higher, but remember, this is not about character quality or their relationship with Shepard. Tali is a top Quarian military official, but do remember that Quarians have a rather small population. Some other points in Tali's favor: she is a skilled engineer, she escaped Saren's assassins, she took part in killing the Rogue Spectre and defeating the Collectors. Tali can also infiltrate the Collector base ventilation system, but do remember that is a somewhat situational feat. Tali is trusted with command of highly dangerous and sensitive missions, but these missions don't end very well. That is not necessarily her fault, but that doesn't raise her profile either. As mentioned, she has a rare example of a head-to-head matchup with Legion, but that is of course highly situational, still worth mentioning though. In B tier, we have Nyreen. Now, Nyreen is only available during the Omega DLC. There's not a ton to go on, but we can make do. First, Nyreen commands Omega's Talon mercenary band. She is highly versatile with skill sets from multiple classes. She leads the resistance against Cerberus' occupation of Omega, as well as its adjutant infestation. She could potentially go higher if we saw more, but we don't. Still enough for B tier though, in my opinion. In A tier, we have Arya. Now, Arya is another one of those squad mates that potentially could go higher. Like Nyreen, she is only available during the Omega DLC. She's an exceptionally powerful biotic and skilled vanguard, a former Asari commando. We see her batting troops aside on a regular basis. Outside sources depict her as exceptionally strong in combat as well. Perhaps Arya's most impressive feat is her conquest of Omega in the first place. She worked her way up from being a dancer in the Afterlife bar to being a top lieutenant of Omega's ruler, a Krogan warlord, to defeating the Krogan warlord and claiming the station for herself. Back down in D tier, we have Mordin. Mordin is my personal favorite character, but again, this isn't about character quality. Mordin is obviously skilled in combat and espionage, but his primary skills are in science. Solarians by their nature are not especially strong or durable, so Mordin would need to find a way to exercise total control over any head-to-head matchups. That's not impossible, but the odds are against him against most in this list. In C tier, we have Jacob. Now, Jacob does not have a ton of on-screen feats. We do know that he serves as a Corsair. We do know that he ran missions with Miranda after joining Cerberus, including stopping a Batarian plot to assassinate the Council. He serves as a security consultant, but is frankly much more suited to commanding troops, such as when he can successfully lead a fire team inside the Collector base. There's not a ton of counter evidence either way, no particular reason to put him higher or lower. To quote a common criticism of Jacob, you could say this is a somewhat bland ranking. In B tier, we have Miranda. Now, Miranda is genetically engineered to near peak human conditions. She is a skilled sentinel with engineering and biotic skills. She's trusted by the Elusive Man with command of critical missions. She is the only Mass Effect 2 squad mate, besides Jacob and Garrus, that can successfully lead a fire team inside the Collector base. She runs missions against Cerberus after she abandons the group, and while she can be mortally wounded while infiltrating Sanctuary, as she would put it, she's not perfect. Overall, solid B. In A tier, we have Admiral David Anderson. Now, Anderson's appearance may come as somewhat of a surprise, but he does accompany you twice, once at the beginning and once at the end of Mass Effect 3. There are no groundbreaking details from these missions, but he does leave the Resistance on Earth, basically surviving while under siege by the Reapers the whole time. His most noteworthy accomplishments actually occur in the books. Now, in the games we learned that he's the first human considered for the Spectres, but more than that, he led the most sensitive missions and investigations for the Alliance, killed a Krogan Battlemaster, had multiple run-ins with Cerberus, including their top assassin Kai Lang, and in between the second and third game, kneecapped Kai Lang, as in, he literally shot both of his kneecaps off. There's very little reason to think he belongs anywhere but A tier. Going back down, we're officially done with D tier, and we'll wrap up C tier. In C tier, I'm going to put both Kanon and Ashley. Now, this may or may not come as a surprise, given that they're appointed to the Spectres in the third game, depending on who survives Vermeer. But this is Udina's decision, and done at least partially for political reasons and or part of his coup plot. It's comparable to making Bailey head of CSEC. They're not unqualified, but there are ulterior motives. They both have distinguished service records and do prove themselves on occasion, but there's not enough evidence to make me go higher. As far as what order to put them in, I'm somewhat inclined to put Kanon just above Ashley because of his specialization. Rounding out C tier, we have Edie. Now, I'm not counting Edie's presence on the Normandy, or she would basically be the most powerful squad mate, period. I'm not comparing warships to a single troop on the ground. This is only about her control of a robot body. There's not a ton to go on as far as Edie's feats go, but the first time we see the body, it puts Kanon or Ashley in the hospital. That's one of a few head-to-head matchups here, so we can put Edie just above them. Rounding out B tier, we have James. James is, of course, a highly capable soldier in Mass Effect 3, serves with Commander Shepard, is accepted in the N7 program, but what puts James above most other humans on this list is what happens prior to Mass Effect 3. Specifically, James survives a Collector invasion and comes away with critical intel. That's all for naught, but that's beside the point. It's still significant. As a side note, James apparently has a personal record of 182 pull-ups, something that Shepard may or may not beat. From here, we'll round out A tier. Finishing off A tier will be Jacques. Jacques being high up should come as no surprise. Jacques is an extremely powerful biotic, raised and experimented on in a Cerberus cell to push past the limits of human biotic ability. The very first time we meet Jacques, Jacques can destroy large mechs single-handedly. Even before joining Shepard, she was a major threat to anyone she came across. She destroyed a Turian warship, despoiled a Hanar moon, and, in general, left a trail of bodies throughout the galaxy, all without military training. There's a reason that Jacques scares people even when locked away and frozen. The only real downside is that she's not as big on tactics when you first meet her, but she does learn that from serving under Shepard and joining the Alliance after Mass Effect 2. Now, Jacques can get captured by Cerberus at Grissom Academy, but that is likely due to her students being held hostage. Basically, this is another character that could potentially go higher, but with the evidence we have, solid A. Going up to Spectre tier, we have Liara. Liara in Spectre tier may come as a bit of a surprise, but Liara comes a long way throughout the trilogy. Even before you meet Liara, she is already a powerful biotic capable of creating singularities. After serving with Shepard and seeing the Normandy get blown up, she ambushes a meeting of Collector forces and Shadow Broker forces to retrieve Shepard's body. Liara later boards the Shadow Broker base, defeats the Shadow Broker, and takes his title for herself. Critically, this happens whether or not you play Lair of a Shadow Broker DLC. If you don't, she forms her own mercenary group to board the ship herself. Liara takes part in killing 2 Spectres, both Saren and Vasir, and is depicted as a match for the latter. In one comic, Liara even creates a barrier capable of protecting a submarine-like craft at the bottom of the Hanar Ocean. Now, this is a comic rather than in-game, but depending on how strongly we count this almost certainly exceeds any other biotic feat in the series. Finishing off Spectre tier, we have our tank baby, Grunt. Now, Grunt is the perfect Krogan that Okeer dedicated his final days to creating and saving. He's a prime physical specimen of a species already feared for being extremely strong and durable. He's mentally strong as well, and keeps a rather cool head considering he's technically a newborn pubescent Krogan. Grunt can participate in killing a Thresher Maw, one of the largest and strongest creatures in the galaxy. For context, Rex was the last Krogan to do so. This means that several centuries went by without this happening. Grunt is trusted with command of Arlac Company, deemed by Rex as the future of Tuchanka, and plows through a swarm of Rachni. Fun fact, not only does Grunt provide a top score for holding the door, but he's recognized in the Mass Effect 3 war assets as being worth more than other individuals. Grunt could potentially defeat anyone on this list, however, he's not placed higher primarily due to experience. He could plausibly match Garrus's feat on Omega, or something similar, but remember that Garrus survived for over a day due to his tactical skills, whereas Grunt's more straightforward approach might not serve him as well in every situation. For S+ tier, we saved the strongest for last. When I covered Garrus, I mentioned that when discussing any other top tier character, we should consider whether or not they could match his feat on Omega. With these last 3, the answer for me is, of course they could. First up, we have Samara. Samara is a former Asari commando. Current Asari Justicar, has been alive for nearly a millennium and has centuries of training and experience. Samara is an extremely powerful biotic. She is one of 3 squadmates who can hold a barrier against the Seeker swarms in the Collector base. In one video in the Shadow Broker base, we see her stop a car from lifting off by holding it. The exact force required is debatable due to the assumed Mass Effect engine at work here, but that's still extremely impressive. Samara has faced off against a Council Spectre, that would be Nihilus. She would have won if he had not figured out a way to force her to choose between catching him and saving innocent lives, as her code dictates she must. That last part might look like a weakness, but she is very clear-eyed about it. For context, Samara has also faced off with an entire village that Morinth mind-controlled into fighting her. The common theme in Samara's exploits is that when she hunts a target, no matter how powerful they are, they run. Next we have Javik. Javik is a powerful biotic, talented marksman, and has tactical skills few can match. He's sort of a Prothean equivalent to Commander Shepard, and was entrusted by the most powerful military in known history to lead the Protheans into the future. Perhaps most impressive is that Jacques had a ship and crew similar to the Normandy. Unfortunately, his squad mates were all indoctrinated and turned against him, and he was forced to kill all of them. Now remember that the Prothean Empire is suggested to be much more powerful and advanced than any of that of a modern galaxy, so I would consider this equivalent to killing most of the people on this list so far. Again, you can make the case that this character could be even higher or at the top, blah blah blah. And at number 1, we have our boy Rex. Rex is a Krogan Battlemaster. He has all the strength and durability of a regular Krogan, plus strong biotic abilities as well. Rex is the last Krogan to kill a Thresher Maw on foot during his rite of passage, when the only requirement is just simply to survive. Rex was a rising clan chief before his exile from Tuchanka, and a much sought after mercenary following his exile. Should Rex survive Mass Effect 1, he returns to Tuchanka and leads Clan Urdnot. We don't see a lot from him combat-wise after this, but he no doubt has to employ violence to take control of Clan Urdnot and keep his fellow Krogan at bay. Age does not appear to slow him down either, as we see him plow through a swarm of Rachni during priority to Tuchanka. Some might argue that he can die in a couple of cutscenes easier than expected, but keep in mind that this is more of a mechanic of plot decisions than anything else. For context, Grunt can go down from arguably less during the suicide mission. In conclusion, I really could not put the most feared and respected member of a planet of big beefy dinosaurs anywhere but at the top. For me, there's enough evidence to say that Rex is truly the strongest squad mate in the entire Mass Effect trilogy. And that's my list. Feel free to leave a comment if you agree or disagree, and feel free to like and subscribe if you enjoy this video. Also feel free to like and subscribe if you don't. I'm not going to stop you. Thanks for watching.